When I started babysitting, the parents gave me a horrifying set of rules. I thought I hit the jackpot when a rich family paid me $200 to babysit their child for a night. I never could have guessed this would have led to my life being ruined forever. The children were extremely well behaved and everything went smoothly the first night. The young couple must have thought that I had done a good job because word spread quickly around the rich neighborhood that I was a great babysitter choice. This was perfect for me. Most of the families around here pay way better than where I live since they all come from a long line of wealthy families, but I was always suspicious about some of the families. You hear rumors about really rich people, some very creepy stories, but I never actually believed any of them. Sometimes I'll babysit for a few hours and make a couple $100. Other times the parents want me to stay the night while they go off and get a hotel room so that they could be away from their kids for a change. That is where I make the big bucks. A couple of days ago, a husband and wife had texted me asking if I could stay the night at their mansion and watch their 7-year-old little girl for them. I happily agreed, not knowing this might be the last time I ever see the outside world again. When the day finally came, I drove my beat-up Jeep Wrangler to the edge of the rich neighborhood and made my way up this private driveway that I had never noticed before because the entrance was hidden back amongst the trees that surround the entire north side of town. I drove up this steep, winding driveway for what seemed like 10 minutes before I finally saw the house come into view. Out of all the houses I've babysat at, this was hands down the most gorgeous one I've ever seen. I hoped I would get some good money for this. I got out of my car and made my way up to the front porch, where I knocked on this gigantic wooden door. A few seconds later, a beautiful woman in her mid-30s answered and introduced herself as Mrs. Collins. She called her husband down, and shortly after, an extremely handsome man, also in his 30s, came walking down the grand stairway, holding an adorable little girl in his arms. The couple seemed very anxious to leave, and even though they were both gorgeous people, I could tell that underneath all of their beauty, they were both extremely tired and haggard from having to keep up with their 7-year-old. They were obviously very excited about having an entire night to themselves, and couldn't wait to get out of there as fast as they could. Before Mr. and Mrs. Collins left, however, Mrs. Collins handed me several pieces of paper and told me that she had written down a couple of instructions for me to follow throughout the night. She stressed to me how important it was to follow her instructions, and I assured her that I'd give them a look. I waved to the pretty young couple as they made their way down the driveway in their expensive Mercedes, and then closed the door behind me. I gave the instructions a quick once-over before folding the papers and stuffing them into my back pocket. I'll look at them later, I told myself. How stupid I was to do that. Mr. and Mrs. Collins' daughter Samantha was a very nice young girl who warmed up to me almost immediately, or so I thought. We had spent the next few hours playing games and watching TV. After we finished our 5th episode of Teen Titans Go, I noticed that it was getting late and asked Samantha what her bedtime was. She shrugged, not really giving me an answer, which is when I remembered Mrs. Collins' instructions. I pulled out the folded pieces of paper and scanned through them very quickly when I saw the words, "Samantha needs to be in bed before 8 p.m. I checked the time to find that it was almost 7:45. "Well, it looks like your bedtime is right now," I said, lift Samantha up off the couch so I could get her ready. She brushed her teeth and I tucked her into her California king-sized mattress. I told her goodnight and was leaving her room when she said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Don't forget to lock my door before you leave," she said. I stopped walking and turned back around toward her, confused. "What do you mean, don't forget to lock your door?" I asked. "Why would I need to lock your door? What if you have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night?" She looked at me innocently and shrugged her shoulders again. "I don't know, but Mommy always locks my door before I go to sleep. She says she does it to protect me and herself. I don't remember what happens after I fall asleep, but Mommy says that I always try to leave my room at night, which is a bad thing." I looked at her dumbfounded. I didn't know what to say. What sort of parents would lock their child in their room at night? "Mommy told me that she would leave instructions for you to follow, and locking my door is one of them," she said. I had forgotten to read the rules. "Oh, okay, Samantha, I'll lock your door. Good. Good night, sweetheart," I stammered. She gave me a big smile and rolled over in her bed. I closed her door and noticed that there was a latch drilled into the door frame that would allow someone to lock it from the outside. I closed the latch and then walked back downstairs so I could read the rest of Mrs. Collins' instructions. When I had first seen the pieces of paper, I was under the impression that they were just instructions that told me what shows Samantha is not allowed to watch or how to operate the surround sound. After I started reading them, though, I realized that I was wrong. I was completely and utterly wrong. I started reading, "Hello, Annie. I'm so glad that you agreed to stay the night and babysit Samantha for us. She's such an angel, and I'm sure that the both of you will get along very well. I know that our house might seem old and scary, but don't worry because nothing bad will happen to you as long as you follow some simple instructions. Firstly, Samantha needs to be in bed in her room with the door locked before 8 p.m. Do not open up her bedroom door after 8 p.m. I repeat, do not open Samantha's bedroom door after 8 p.m. She will try to convince you to open the door in many different ways. She will cry, scream, and threaten you until you give in, but do not listen to her. She can't hurt you as long as the door is closed." At this point, I was confused. Why would I leave her locked in there if she was screaming and crying to let her out? Something horribly wrong was going on here, but I continued reading. "Between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m., make sure you remain in the living room with the lights turned on. Around this time of night, you may hear scratching and growling coming from Samantha's room or from other parts of the house. These noises are nothing to worry about as long as you stay in the living room. Watch some TV to pass the time. We have a lot of movies to choose from. After 9:30, do not venture into any dark areas of the house. I would recommend that you turn on as many lights as you can before 9:30 so that you don't accidentally trap yourself. You might also happen to see a pair of yellow cat eyes looking at you through the darkness every once in a while. Do not stare at them for more than 30 seconds. These rules were getting more effed up by the second. I started sweating, my body feeling glued to the floor as I read over the strict but extremely terrifying rules that were put in place. Why had I agreed to take this job? At around 10 p.m., it might begin to sound like there are several people walking around in the basement downstairs. Do not worry, because as long as you stay out of the basement, they cannot get to you. I know it sounds unlikely, but around this time you will begin to feel an overwhelming urge to walk down into the basement. If this happens, go into the kitchen and drink a cold glass of milk. This usually helps. The urge will most likely pass after about 10 minutes, but if the urge is still there after 10 minutes and you don't think that you will be able to stop yourself from walking into the basement, then call either me or Mr. Collins, and we'll tell you what to do. Now this next part is very important. You will be sleeping in our guest room upstairs for the night. Before you go to bed, make sure that you leave a plate outside your bedroom door with a piece of raw steak on it. You can find the raw steak in our refrigerator, and leave a glass of milk next to the plate as well. And that's about it. Final rule, don't eat meat after 8 o'clock. They might see it as a threat and will most likely attack you. P.S. Throughout the night you might hear a dog whimpering from somewhere off inside the house. We don't have a dog, so don't go looking for it. I hadn't realized what I had gotten myself into. Right as I had finished reading the rules, it was 8:31, and the growling noises just started. It sounded like they were coming from every room in the effing house. My hands were shaking as I reread the instructions, the realization of what I was dealing with sinking in. I was trapped in a house with something that was far from normal. The growling noises were getting louder and seemed to be coming from every room. I forced myself to calm down, taking deep breaths. I had to follow the rules no matter how bizarre they were. Over the next few hours, things only got stranger and more terrifying. The growling turned into scratching, and sometimes I would hear what sounded like a soft whimpering, like a dog. But I remembered Mrs. Collins's postscript. They didn't have a dog. I stayed in the living room, keeping the lights on as instructed, and waited. The urge to go down to the basement was strong, but I fought against it, going into the kitchen and gulping down glasses of milk. Around 10 p.m., I heard the sounds of footsteps in the basement, but I didn't go down there. I stayed put, watching TV to distract myself from the cacophony. It was during one of these distractions that I noticed a different piece of paper on the coffee table, a sheet that had been tucked away under a magazine. It was a diet plan for Samantha, written in Mrs. Collins's neat handwriting. My heart skipped a beat as I read through it. It was a weekly meal plan, but it wasn't the usual fare you'd feed a 7-year-old. Liver on Monday, kidneys on Wednesday, heart on Friday. It was a diet composed of human organs. My stomach churned as the horrifying truth hit me. Samantha wasn't just some ordinary child. She was something else. As the realization dawned on me, I heard a loud crash from upstairs. It sounded like a door being broken down. The noise was followed by the soft padding of feet on the staircase. Samantha. I could hear her humming a lullaby as she descended, her voice echoing through the eerily silent house. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood rooted to the spot, my mind racing. I thought back to Mrs. Collins's instructions, her insistence that I follow them exactly, but it was too late for that now. I had made a terrible mistake, and now I was about to pay the price. I could hear Samantha getting closer, her humming growing louder. It was then that I realized the horrifying truth. I wasn't here to babysit Samantha. I was here to feed her. I was the meal.